As you saw there, Cheltenham, key Lib Dem target seat. I'm now joined by the party's deputy leader, Sir Ed Davey. Thank you for being in the studio with us today. I'm keen to get your response to what I found in Cheltenham, but first it feels that we should really start with the terror attacks, the tragic scenes that we saw on Friday at London Bridge. How should politicians be responding to what happened?
Well, first of all, we should be thinking of the victims and their families. This is a huge tragedy, and we're incredibly grateful to the emergency service and the public who responded so amazingly. I've been a bit alarmed, though, about the way the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has responded. He seems to be politicising this at a time when we really should be thinking about the families. And worse still, he's misleading people about what the current law is. He's trying to say that there is early release now, but actually that was got rid of in 2012. A Liberal Democrat Justice Minister, Tom McNally, put forward legislation which has meant that the early release no longer happens. A terrorist offender has to serve at least 2/3 of the term, and then it's not automatic release. So what the Prime Minister's calling for has already happened.
At the same time, though, some people would say, you say that early release doesn't happen anymore. Some people would say that if you don't serve the full sentence that you were given, that is early release, and that's what Boris Johnson is trying to stop.
Well, the parole board will make the decision, the new legislation, and I'm afraid the Prime Minister was misleading people again on television. Last night, he said that the current law is that people get early release after 50% of the term. That's not true. And either he's incompetent and doesn't know the law, or he's deliberately misleading people when we've got a tragedy on our hands. And I'm afraid either way does not look good for the Prime Minister, and he should be apologising. And, we shouldn't be making, in the middle of an election, political capital out of a tragedy. And he's doing that, and he's doing that in a way which is misleading people about what the law actually says.
Well, we'll be putting some of this to Dominic Raab later on the programme, the Foreign Secretary. Jeremy Corbyn, in the interview that I did with him earlier, said that he doesn't think it should necessarily be the case that terrorists should serve their full sentences. What's the Liberal Democrat position?
Well, we stand by the law that we strengthened, where terrorists should serve at least 2/3.
So not necessarily a full sentence?
Well, the decision shouldn't be taken by politicians. It should be taken by the parole board. Under the old law that was passed before, it was automatic release. The parole board wasn't involved. And it only came after 50% of the term. The new law, which Liberal Democrats helped get through, says they have to serve 2/3, and then it's not automatic. And then it's based on the evidence. And if they are still dangerous, they are kept inside as they should be. I think that's the right balance. And that's the truth, unlike what the Prime Minister's saying.
Okay.
I'm afraid he has a track record of misleading people on this issue, on Brexit, and on so many things. I'm really alarmed that we are on the brink of having a Prime Minister who is the most untruthful Prime Minister of all time.
OK, that is a big claim that I will be putting to Dominic Raab later on, and I'm sure, of course, that the Conservative Party would dispute that.
Well, look at his record. We've never had a Prime Minister who's been sacked from 2 jobs for lying. Sacked from the front bench of the Conservative Party, sacked from a job as a journalist. He has made a career out of misleading people, and I'm afraid on many issues, including Brexit, he's misleading the British people.
I'm keen to talk about Brexit and about the Liberal Democrats' position in the election as well. We've just seen a film from Cheltenham. I have to be honest, I went there thinking it was going to be an absolute shoo-in for the Liberal Democrats. It's a seat that you've held historically. It's a seat that voted to remain. It's a seat where the Conservative Party do not have a big majority. But it was a lot closer than I thought it was going to be when I went out on the streets and talked to people about how they were feeling. I mean, are you a bit worried about the way the campaign's going?
We're seeing great response in target seats like Cheltenham, and many seats that voters strongly remain, where it's the Liberal Democrats attacking the Conservatives and their MPs. It does really seem to me that if we're going to stop Boris Johnson getting a majority, it's going to be the Liberal Democrats who can do that in seats like Cheltenham. So if people want to prevent Boris Johnson with his very right-wing agenda, his Brexit agenda, if they want to prevent that happening in seat after seat, a vote for the Liberal Democrats is the way to do that.
At the same time, though, I can't help but feel that for many voters, the reason that they don't really like the idea of Boris Johnson as Prime Minister or Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister is because they think they're quite extreme politicians. And yet, by adopting a position of revoking Article 50 if you're in government, are you not just making yourselves an extreme party?
No, what we've said is we want to stop Brexit, that's the policy, and we want to do it democratically. And the most likely way is that we'll be having a people's vote. Liberal Democrats have led the campaign for a people's vote, so it's up to the people to have the final say. We put 17 amendments down in the last Parliament and led those, and it was Labour who often failed.
You're changing the emphasis here, aren't you?
No, not at all.
It does feel that you've realised
Sophie,
that
no,
the
I'm sorry, I can't
revoking has
accept
landed
that.
badly.
I can't
you're now focusing again on the idea of a second referendum.
I can't accept that. We have said all along that we are the People's Vote Party. We have added the fact that if we won a majority, and there was a political earthquake, which meant that we went from 12 MPs 2 years ago to 326. Yes, we would see that as a democratic mandate, and I think that's fairly indisputable. But failing that political earthquake, the Liberal Democrat position, and has always been, is for a people's vote. Because we do want to take the people with us. We do want to end the divisions in our country which the Conservatives have caused. And we do want to help people and give them the chance to stop Brexit.
Some of the recent polling and seat projections has shown that perhaps the big expectations at the beginning of the campaign are, let's say, not quite being met. I mean, there are lots of polls. We'll just have a look at one in particular. This is a YouGov poll on the 29th of November, putting the Conservatives at 43%, Labour at 34%, the Liberal Democrats on 13%. Now, of course, it's one poll, but it is reflective of what we're seeing across the board, which is the Lib Dems having a bit of a disappointing campaign, aren't you?
Well, it is only one poll, but I'd also say that the election in Britain today is fought in seat by seat. So there will be parts of the country where we're not doing very well, but there are other parts where we're doing incredibly well. And in our target seats, particularly in seats where there's quite a big Remain vote, and seats where we've got great local candidates, we're seeing a much better rating than you've just shown. And we believe we can take a lot of seats off, and some off Labour and others. But it's the seats we take off the Conservatives which will decide this election. This election could be decided by Liberal Democrat victories. If Liberal Democrats win in seat after seat against the Conservatives, we can stop Boris Johnson. And people are seeing Jeremy Corbyn's party going backwards. It's really clear from poll after poll that Corbyn is going to lose seats. So he's not going to be the Prime Minister. But we can stop a Boris Johnson majority if people back us in those key target seats.
The polling also shows, slightly brutally, that the more people see of Jo Swinson, your leader, the less they like her.
But not in our target seats. In our target seats, she's incredibly popular. You go and actually poll Remain voters, she's really doing really well.
I'll be honest, a lot of people brought her up in a negative way when I spoke to them.
Well, but that wasn't a poll, was it? Let's be fair.
Right. No, it's unscientific.
We've got polling evidence.
I just have to speak of what I said.
Yeah, sure, and I understand, Sophie. That's fine. But in poll after poll that we've seen in target seats, Jo is incredibly popular. And let's look at a poll that's been out just this weekend. It shows in Esher and Walton, which has been a traditional Conservative seat, the Liberal Democrats are on the verge of beating Dominic Raab, the Foreign Secretary, a key Brexiteer, as the Remain voters come behind us. And what's going to be critical, and I'll be frank with you, in the next few days, is if the third party vote, if it's a Labour third party, for example, when we're fighting the Conservatives, if that comes to the Liberal Democrats in places like Esher and Walton, but in many other places too, we can stop Boris Johnson. And we're the only party who can stop Boris Johnson now.
You, of course, ran against Jo Swinson for the leadership of your party. What would you have done differently?
Nothing. I think she's been doing a fantastic job. I think her leadership on the Brexit has been inspiring. And I think the fact that she's put investment in education and childcare at the top of agenda, and climate change. And one of the reasons why...
Would you run a presidential-style campaign?
Look, one of the reasons why we want to stop Brexit, because you forget the individuals, one of the reasons why Jo is so right that we want to stop Brexit is because then you'd get a Remain bonus and you'd be able to have much more money to invest in education. Then you'd be at the table on climate change talks. I think pulling out of Europe, when the climate emergency is so important, I think it's a climate crime. If you really care about climate change, you should be at every international table arguing the issue. The climate emergency is probably the biggest challenge facing this country and the world. And we've got to wise up. We represent 1.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions, just 1.5%. So we could be brilliant, but the rest of the world could fry. So if you're not at the EU table, if you're not at the United Nations table, you are frankly giving up on climate change. And that's why Liberal Democrats want to stop Brexit. We want to be at the European Union table so we can persuade others to take the actions that are necessary to keep our planet safe.
OK, just finally, Is there a chance that Jo Swinson might be Prime Minister?
Who knows? I'm not going to judge the British people before they've voted. It's not looking as likely as I'd hoped it would be, but, you know, the polls have not even opened yet, Sophie.
OK. Davey, thank you very much for coming in the studio today. Much appreciated.